Yeah, so obviously, of course, we don't start these podcasts or videos any certain way, but I asked Jordan if he wanted to start a podcast or film a podcast with me, and I asked him what topic you want to talk about. He said, I just want to go with the flow. So I think that brings us to the podcast topic, which is following your intuition. And I think your whole life has really been led by your intuition. So I really want to get your thoughts on intuition and start with the beginning. Like, when did you start really listening to your intuition and following it on your journey?
First of all, that's a hell of an intro. You caught me off guard with that one. I'm not gonna lie.
Tell you.
You caught me off guard. This
I'm
man's
elevating.
professional.
I'm elevating. Let's go.
Professional. But as far as following my intuition goes, I feel like I always had the innate knowing that my intuition was very, very powerful. I just didn't know which direction to channel it toward.
Mm-hmm.
But I always had these intuitive senses that, for example, I don't like structure. I gravitate toward freedom and liberation in whatever capacity I could find that. And I feel like right around the time that I dropped out of college, that was when I made that decision to walk down that path and commit to my intuition. And from there, it's just been a snowball effect where I've suddenly ended up in this position right here.
Yeah, we're going to get all the way there. But like, so in high school, do you think about, you were a spiritual person in a sense, like you said, you meditated with your dad and things like that. But were you really spiritual? Like, were you listening to your spirit or following your intuition in high school, or was it you were just messing around?
I think I was conceptually spiritual in that I had spiritual knowledge, but I didn't really have the life understanding, the contextual understanding to apply it at will the way that I do now. And I did still operate from a scarcity mindset. I operated from a place of fear. I was living outside of myself, living in third person in a sense, in that my internal reference point, or my reference point, was external, not internal. And like I said, it wasn't until about that time that I dropped out of college that slowly began to shift. But just growing up in general, I always knew about spirituality, and I knew about manifestation. I knew about intuition and the higher self and things like that because I was exposed to this information early on. But I guess I just either wasn't old enough or didn't have the emotional maturity, didn't have the self-awareness to really apply it the way that I can apply it now. But definitely wasn't an overnight process, for sure.
And usually, like, the first time that you follow your intuition, or really first time you do most of anything, it comes when you have to. So I think that's when it happened in college for you. You were in there and you knew it wasn't for you, and so you were against the wall. You had to make that decision and that fork in the road. So yeah, tell us, like, what really made you make that decision in that moment.
As far as dropping out of college, really the decision came the last day of high school. I believe it was January 19th or January 20th of 2018, my last day of high school. I walked out of that school for the last time, and I wholeheartedly, I can say that up to that point in my life, that was the happiest day of my life, was when I walked out of high school. And that was a feeling that really stuck with me. I remember what the weather was like. It was cloudy outside. I remember my outfit. I was wearing this pink H&M shirt, the black jeans, the stressed denim, black Vans. That was just a very, very happy day for me. And I remember in that moment thinking, man, I'm free. And freedom was something that I really gravitated towards. So to have that freedom for the first time and knowing that I'm no longer obligated to go to school, that was when I knew right there. But like I said earlier, I was still living from a third person point of view. I still operated from that external reference point, and I allowed societal expectations from, a lot of it honestly was self-inflicted, just me having that fear and imagining what I thought other people would think if I didn't go to school, because nobody explicitly told me, hey, you need to go to college, other than teachers and whatnot. But once I was out of high school, nobody was there to tell me, hey, you need to go to college. It was maybe implied or expected, but nobody told me that. But once I got to college, really, it was once I began to sign up for college. I remember I had this dreadful feeling that, yeah, this isn't really... And you know what? I want to go ahead and put this out there. I feel like your intuition usually starts with a negative feeling. That's how you learn to operate. Right. You learn from maybe fear or just that misalignment where you know that, okay, this is not the path that I need to go down. And I know that. And from that point, you can either make the decision to follow your intuition, or you can take the path that represents resistance in your life. And you can end up basically following your intuition down the line anyways.
Yeah.
Because eventually, I feel like life, at least in my life thus far, life has this way of kind of not forcing you. It doesn't infringe upon your free will, but it kind of, you always end up back on that path.
It's gonna make you miserable if you don't. Like the whole time you're gonna be thinking about what you could have done, what you should have done on the other path.
Exactly. So I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot what you asked. I'm just going on a tangent.
But yeah, and then so that made you make the decision. You said you were basing your decisions on like fear and stuff at first, and then from there that led you to starting YouTube. So how long was that gap, and then what really was the thing? So the YouTube decision, was that like you were more in tune with your intuition, or was able to make that decision?
YouTube wasn't even a decision that I made. It wasn't even a conscious commitment. Funny enough, and I'm sure we'll circle back to this later as I divulge some of my plans for the foreseeable future. My first initial instinct when I dropped out of college was to create a blog. It was a travel blog. So I feel like that's kind of, it trips me out because your intuition is usually right. It's always right, really. And it's on you whether or not you want to follow your intuition. At that moment, I chose not to follow my intuition because I couldn't see how I would make that happen. Didn't know how to make a website. So I'm on Wix or Squarespace just trying to figure this shit out. I got intimidated. I said, nah, I'm not going to do this. I know how to make a video. I can just record it on my phone, whatever. Cool. So I kind of just fell into YouTube in a sense. But even when I started making videos, my first few videos, if you look, not including the basketball content, maybe that is my calling, I don't know, but my first few videos were self-improvement type videos. And that actually ended up being the thing that took me to that next level. So more often than not, you're right the first time. And that's because of your intuition. Your intuition is what enables you to see beyond your current situation with the eyes that don't necessarily see physically, with that third eye.
Yeah, so that it was a gradual, it was more, the YouTube thing was more gradual than making a decision, I'm going to commit to YouTube?
Yeah, it was kind of so I dropped out of school, I think March 19th, 2019. March 19th or March 22nd, one of the 2 days. But I started my YouTube channel where I posted that why I dropped out of college video, I believe April 1st. So maybe about a week and some change later. But I didn't make that video with the intention of becoming a YouTuber. That was not my intention by any means. I literally only made that video because I knew people were going to ask me. And this kind of goes back to the whole insecure and external reference point thing. But I knew people were going to ask me why I dropped out of college. So I figured, let me go ahead and just give them the answer in this video so that I don't have to keep explaining myself over and over and over again.
Yeah. And then it just turned into, how long did it take for you to turn into like, I actually enjoy doing this. I want to do more of this. I want to talk about self-improvement. How long did that take?
So honestly, at the time, my general goal, aside from working for myself, was to be rich. So there were a few different paths that I knew I could take to that, but YouTube was the one that I knew the most about. So as far as things like drop shipping and day trading and whatnot, I gave like half-hearted attempts at those things. I didn't really, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know how to make websites and stuff like that. So I wasn't really comfortable with working with Shopify or reading charts or anything like that. YouTube was just easy. It just was the easiest thing for me because I had already made a few videos from the basketball content. And really, it was just a matter of speaking to the phone, chopping the footage up, and then posting it. And to me, that just seemed like the lowest barrier to entry because it's free. You don't have to really invest your money into YouTube if you don't want to. So it was just kind of me being broke and just being lazy, I guess.
Yeah. And I had thought about like entrepreneurship, and you were telling me that I'm an entrepreneur. Would you say you're an entrepreneur?
I would say I'm a creative first and foremost.
Right.
And that's something it took me a long time to realize that
Okay.
because I definitely, like I said, my goal at the time was to be rich because I thought that was the end all be all. I thought when you get money, you're good, you're happy. But what I realized is that there's a deeper sense of fulfillment to be found in creative endeavors, at least for me. Just creating for the sake of creating without really much of an end goal in mind. I mean, the only end goal that I really care about is inspiring people. And I know that sounds cliche and it sounds like the politically correct thing to say. But I feel like when you've actually inspired people, when you know what that feels like, you understand why people say that.
Right.
Because there's certain things that money can't really buy. And that's one of them. It's just this feeling that allows you to know, just like we were talking about in the last podcast with love. Love is when you see yourself in somebody else. Inspiration is kind of an extension of that. It's the offspring, the cousin of love in that way, in that it allows you to connect with other people. And for me, my purpose, it always comes back to creating and inspiring. So as long as I'm doing those things, I feel like, and also let me just, to get back on topic, as far as being an entrepreneur, I've tried different things. I actually worked with the Mamba Atlas. Shout out to him. Shout out to Don. I worked with him as my editor for a while. And I didn't really like the feeling of just having somebody on my payroll or just having an employee in a sense, even though he was a independent contractor. I didn't really like that feeling. And I know I don't like to work for other people. So I always assumed that because I didn't like to work for others, that meant I was an entrepreneur. But really, I think I'm more of a self-employed person. So somebody who's just as free as possible to do whatever I want, whenever I want, with as few responsibilities as possible, with the exception of creating.
Right.
That's basically my dream life at this point.
Right. And yeah, I was thinking that entrepreneurship kind of falls into two categories. Like one entrepreneur wants to make money, and one entrepreneur wants to solve problems. And I think I'm more of the solving problem one, where I don't really care about the money too much as long as they can solve a problem. At least, feed myself, want that. And then I think, so you were more, would you say, so you just, are you not going to use the term entrepreneur and mostly just creative and independent?
I mean, personally, I don't label myself as an entrepreneur. I guess you could technically say that because I've built a brand, which the brand is predicated on me.
Right.
So I don't really see it as that in a sense, but if people want to call me that, I don't really care. I see myself as a creative first. And I think the difference, this is something that I noticed with YouTube in particular. Go ahead and sit forward for this one, because I feel like with YouTube, you really see what somebody is.
Right.
In that, in our space, or really with any niche, it's very easy to just create the same content over and over and over again. And it could generate a lot of revenue, but it might not be fulfilling. That is where you realize whether or not you're an entrepreneur. Because I feel like the entrepreneur, they're going to do what works. But for me, I don't care how much money it makes me. It's strange. The times where I've gotten the most views, the most channel growth, and made the most money on YouTube were the times where I was the most miserable on YouTube. Because I was sticking to a formula that I knew worked, but it wasn't in alignment with myself. Because I'm constantly evolving. And for me, my content or any creative endeavor that I partake in has to reflect that. Otherwise, I feel like I'm stagnating with my content, with my art. So YouTube really helped me figure that out, that I'm really not cut for that type of lifestyle. But this isn't to put anyone down who is, as long as you're providing value, even if you're creating the same content over and over and over again, if you're providing value, you do you. But my thing is, be true to yourself. If you're an entrepreneur, be the best entrepreneur you could be. If you're somebody who likes to be self-employed, be the best self-employed independent contractor you can be. If you're somebody who wants to be an employee and have that stability, then be the best employee you can be, the best employee that you can be. But just be true to yourself.
Right. And let's talk about that, where you said you went through tough periods in your YouTube journey when you're making a bunch of money, but it still wasn't soul fulfilling. Okay, so in those situations, do you feel like you weren't listening to your intuition and it was telling you to do something different? Or do you think, what do you really think about during that time?
Definitely. I definitely feel like my intuition was leaning toward writing at the time, but I couldn't really see how, for one, I would make money with that. And I felt like it wasn't as silly as it sounds. I didn't think it was as admirable, I guess, in the space that I was in, especially to write poetry books about past love affairs when I had made all of these videos about not simping and so on and so forth. I felt like it'd be hypocritical of me. What I realized is, who fucking cares?
Right.
I feel like at a certain point, it's like, man, you gotta live for yourself, man. You gotta. I feel like living for yourself is the best way that you can provide value to other people. That's why I said stay true to yourself. But I would say, just to give you guys a time frame, July of 2021 and January of 2022 were my 2 highest earning and 2 highest viewed months, I believe, or maybe June 2021 actually, were my highest earning and highest view months on YouTube. And like I said, I was the most miserable. I felt like I was just numb in a sense, where I was really just blocking my intuition out and just trying to live solely at the surface level because I was afraid. I was afraid of poverty. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid to apply my own advice. But now I'm not.
Yeah. And I like what you said about, or I call it like self-respect, having self-respect to listen to yourself rather than others. Do you think that's like one of the key aspects that help you really listen to your intuition? Because you're gonna be blocked from listening to your intuition if you think about what your mom or your grandma or everybody is gonna say about you. And intuition is usually a lot different from what your parents or someone else thinks. So do you think that self-respect is really one of the main aspects of that?
Absolutely. You have to have integrity in this life. You have to. If you want to live a fulfilling life, you have to have integrity, because you have to think about it. Your intuition isn't there for no reason. It's there for a reason. And while I am a big proponent of manifestation and free will, I also believe that manifestation can be reconciled with destiny. And I feel like it's our destiny to manifest our destiny in a sense. But I'm saying that to say that if you make it your mission to manifest your intuition, your life, a life beyond anything that you could ever conceive of with your mind, will unfold right before your eyes. And you'll know that there is an aspect of divinity in this world. There's an aspect that we can't see, but we inherently know is there. Because intuition, synchronicity, all of these things, these are the language of the divine, whatever the divine is for you. So I think it's really about, like you said, self-respect, but you have to know what self actually is. Because self is not just this. It's something beyond this. And that gives a whole new meaning to what it means to have self-respect and to have that integrity. Because now, I said this in a recent video, but I'm not betting on myself. I'm betting on God when I make these moves, when I take these leaps of faith. And when you bet on God, you can't lose.
Yeah, best person bet on right there.
I like my odds.
Yes, sir. So, your videos start popping off, you make some money on YouTube, and then you decide to write a poetry book about love. Yeah. So, tell us your thought process on that, and what made you take that leap.
So that was kind of a transition. I feel like it was one of those things where it was overnight, but it was months in the making at the same time, where it was just a lot of repressed energy, all just divulged in one go. But basically, okay, I feel like in a weird way, and I'm not even just saying this to promote the book, but this book kind of recounts that story. It kind of recounts how I went from being in this relationship with an amazing woman, by the way, being in a relationship with this amazing woman, to realizing that I was still in love with someone else, to using YouTube as a distraction and falling in love with the results that I got from that, from obsessively giving myself to YouTube at the expense of my well-being and my ex's well-being, and ultimately coming out of that relationship and realizing that now that I've let go of that aspect of my life, because I broke up with my ex and took my first break from YouTube within the same week, and my whole sense of self collapsed. Everything that I thought I knew about myself disappeared, and all I was left with was that intuition. And that was one of the most divine periods of my entire life. That whole process from deciding to write the book to writing the book, everything just, I have so many stories of stuff that happened. So many journal entries, so many poems about some of the things that I experienced during that time frame. And most of all, I feel like during that period, I found my true self. And that's when I learned what that self-respect really was. And when I found that, I knew that, okay, I need to live in alignment, live in accordance with this. I need to be obedient to my intuition because my intuition is obedient to me, my true self. So once I got a taste of that, once I experienced that for the first time, a glimpse of the light, I realized that I have to live like that. There's no other option. There's no going back. But nevertheless, my ego got the best of me, and I tried to go back anyways. And part of that was me getting that BMW, for example. Mm-hmm. That was me committing to my ego and saying, I'm going to get this car, and I'm just going to use YouTube to pay it off, which was, in retrospect, a terrible fucking decision. Not just from a financial aspect, but from a mental health standpoint. Terrible, terrible methodology of life, in my opinion. But to each their own, like I said. But I feel like I said, January, I released the book January 11th, but I finished it in December. I'm talking about Soul Shock. And when I released the book, I went all in on YouTube for about a month. And like I said, January was actually my highest viewed month in my channel's history. And it was also one of the most miserable months of my life. I mean, like, it kind of just, once I realized that, I kind of fell into this crisis state because I knew that my days on YouTube, or my days as a YouTuber, were numbered because I had experienced truth for the first time through not just the spiritual practices, the implementation of the spiritual practices with that context of my life situation, but writing that book and expressing that understanding, that new sense of self through my art. Once I got a taste of that, I knew there was no going back to the life that I used to live. And when my ego got the best of me for that time period where I was getting the views and so on and so forth, I was promptly humbled by the universe, by God, by the powers that be. I was humbled through different events that occurred, which I talk about in my next book, Ego Death. I was humbled. And it took me a while to come to terms with my truth and to let go of not only the financial benefits of being a full-time YouTuber and posting all of this content, but the identity aspects, the self-identification with my channel and with my success. I had to learn to let go of that and reinvent myself. And part of that was physical, just changing my hairstyle and getting rid of a lot of my clothes and stuff that I felt like I equated with being that YouTube sensation, the Gucci belt and stuff like that. But the change was mostly internal, just understanding that I need to stay true to myself and have faith. And I'm willing to live with the consequences of that.
So that book, it wasn't just good for you to get the emotions off your chest, but that like really kind of changed pretty much your life and your trajectory and really realizing what you were meant to do.
Yeah, it really opened the door for me. It opened the door, and I took that first step in, and there was no going back.
That's big.
There was no going back from that. And I want to share some very, very confidential information. I won't go too deep into the specifics, but somebody reached out to me recently. Somebody that, if you've been following my channel, especially in 2021, you might have seen before. Quite a few times, actually. And I won't talk about everything that was said, but something that this person told me was that when they were with me, they saw a spark with me in writing. And it completely fucked me up because at that time that me and this person were together, I wasn't even aware of that. I knew, I guess, at a subconscious level, but I hadn't even started writing Soul Shock yet. That was after me and this person were no longer together. And so for this person to say that, it tripped me out. it tripped me out because I realized that my intuition is not wrong, because my intuition is being reflected back to me through these synchronicities, because this person isn't the only person who's told me that. But for somebody who spent so much time in a state of emotional intimacy with me, where we kind of confided in each other for months at a time, for this person to tell me that, for me to know that they saw that in me before I saw it in myself, that was very reassuring for me. And that kind of helped me solidify that faith that I am on the right path, that I am on the right track in my life.
So you write, or you publish Soul Shock in January, and you're about to publish Ego Death November, this upcoming week or a week or so. And then from this decision, from these two books and just you enjoying writing, you kind of decide that you want to go almost completely full time into being an author, and you want to announce the next venture that you're gonna do.
So basically, I'm gonna make more videos about this in the future. So I won't go into the complete specifics because if I'm being honest, I don't even know myself. Like, I know the decision that I've made is final, but basically, I'm getting rid of my apartment. I have about a month left on my lease. Getting rid of my apartment. I'm selling everything that does not fit in my car, and I'm hitting the road. And I'm just gonna travel. I'm gonna travel, and I'm gonna write. And it's kind of crazy because I feel like a lot of life is just giving yourself permission to do the things that you want to do. Because I had to realize, what do I want to do in life? I want to write, and I want to travel. And what's the only thing preventing me from doing that? Why can I not travel right now? Because I don't have enough money. Why don't I have enough money? Because I'm paying rent. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What if I just got rid of the apartment and got rid of the rent and just use that money to travel instead? Which would actually, or at least ideally, enhance my writing because I have more perspective. To me, it's a no-brainer. But I feel like maybe 2 years ago, I was too caught in my mind to really understand why my intuition was telling me to make this move.
And man, that's why I want to talk about intuition, because you heard the man. In about a year, he went from I don't even know, probably this year he bought a Gucci belt. Was that? Would you say what month that was?
That was December of 2021.
Okay, so yeah, about a year ago he bought a Gucci belt, and now a year later he's selling all his apartment, all his belongings. He sold the Gucci belt.
Haven't sold it yet, but if when do you guys want to buy it? When do you guys want to buy it? I will sell it to you.
Yeah, you can put that up. That'd be a good momentous thing you can do. But yeah,
I'm saying.
He's selling all that and going full time into writing, traveling, man. And I think that's what you're talking about. 2 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been able to make this decision. So I think starting from high school and dropping out of college, all those small steps led to kind of this moment of you having the confidence to completely follow your intuition and do something as wild as that to some people.
Yeah, I mean, it was that snowball effect. But honestly, I think the faith came from the synchronicity. Just the synchronicity aspect of seeing that for whatever reason, when I put more of my focus into writing and living in my truth, it seems like things just start to happen in my life that just confirm it back to me. Whereas with YouTube, it feels like I'm by myself. It just feels like I'm all alone and I just have to work my way to success. Like, there's not really that sense of divinity in there. And that's something that it was very difficult. It felt like I had to make a choice between my mind and my soul. And I picked my soul unapologetically.
Right. So that's kind of the career path of following your intuition. But I think your love life also followed the intuition, if you want to speak about that. But how much do you want to go into that? Because basically that whole journey also completely followed the intuition too.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, if you just read the books, you'll get a pretty good sense. I think you'll get a much better sense than I could ever explain right here. But there's so many events that occurred in the past couple years, and he knows probably the majority of the things that have happened. But I don't even know what to say about that, honestly. I mean, it's just so it's so from the dreams that I had growing up to, I don't even know, bro. It's weird. Like my life is just a fucking movie, man.
You read the books, man. Read the books.
I'm saying
but yeah, that's why I tell him that he's one of the people who follow their intuition or have these soul connections or spiritual connections like the most of anyone I've ever seen. Like things like he'll talk about like butterflies he's talking about, and then the next day like I'll be with him and then I'll see a butterfly and we'll talk about like it's something crazy. So like I said, buy the books so you can really get full depth about that. But I would ask you what's next, but I already know the answer. You just being present and following your intuition, right? Or how would you say if I asked you what's next? How would you answer that question?
I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head right there.
Right.
Just being present.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're getting ready to live out of a car, you have no choice but to be present, man. There's nothing else you can do. But it's kind of funny. This is something that me and him were talking about prior to the podcast. But I feel like what prevents a lot of people from following their dreams or doing what they want to do is the fear of loss. They fear losing something, whether it's a material possession or maybe the approval of other people. Once I got past the approval aspect, as far as losing my material possessions, how can you lose anything if you sell it all? So I feel like sometimes I'm gonna tie that back in with a quote that I heard a while back. If you want to be intelligent, you add more. If you want to be wise, you subtract more. So you start letting go of things and you start to get to the root of the meaning of life through simplicity. And to me, that's proven to be true 100%.
Yeah, that's good advice right there. And if you were to sum up your whole journey, there might be a high schooler watching her and they want to learn to start following their intuition and the spirit that guides all of us. What's something you can kind of sum up that really help them follow their intuition?
Be present. Because your intuition is always going to be in the present moment. You're always going to receive those ideas in the present moment. A lot of people, they have these dreams for themselves. They have these goals that they set. First of all, examine your goals. Examine why you want your goals, because some of them are probably completely irrelevant in the context of your spiritual purpose in this life, which is why I like to say that you shouldn't seek fulfillment through your purpose. Your purpose should be an expression of your fulfillment. And in that comes an inherent sense of presence. You have that present moment awareness because you're not seeking anything outside of yourself anymore. You're free to live in the present moment because you don't fear anything and you no longer carry the baggage of the guilt and the shame of your past. And when you live in the clarity of the moment, you realize that the most logical thing you can do is to follow your intuition. It's been right there the whole time. A lot of you guys, you know what you want to do in life. You know who you really are. The problem is that you're so preoccupied with external things. But you have to understand that life itself is an internal experience. All of the things that you see, for example, let's get scientific about this. All of the things that you see, if you're watching this video right now, you're watching this podcast, you might see 2 black men sitting on this couch talking. But the only reason why you see that is because of the light receptors in your eyes, right? So if me and Bryce have 2 different light receptors, maybe one of us is colorblind, for example, we're not going to see the same thing. We're going to see life in 2 completely different ways. And I'm saying all of this to say that stop focusing on things that don't matter. Okay, the things outside of yourself are not real. It's all illusory. It's all a facade. The only reality exists within. And once you know that, once you understand that, that's where following your intuition becomes the natural progression of your life. It's the nature of life. It's the nature of our existence to follow our intuition. I would say it goes even beyond intuition because you reach a point where it becomes automatic. If you look outside right now, depending on where you live, you might see the leaves falling off the trees. That's just what they do. That's who they are. They live in the present. And they're not afraid. The trees aren't afraid to let go of the leaves because they understand that they'll grow back in the next season.
That's good. Right? That's a good analogy right there. And then the one last thing, just like how do you feel right now making that decision? Because we kind of talked about things that on paper, this led to this, that's led to that. And you talk about in your YouTube journey, the months you made the most money, you're the most miserable, and now you're doing the thing that on paper to other people is the craziest thing you've done. But yeah, how do you feel right now?
I feel at peace. I feel like the craziest thing I've done was to not live in alignment with my intuition. That's crazy. That's insanity, because you're isolating yourself from the divine, your greatest support system that there is. So to me, I feel like I mean, there are moments where I lose that sense of peace. I mean, I'm not perfect or anything. There are definitely moments of just sheer terror. I'm like, bro, what the fuck am I doing? But those are overshadowed by that deeper understanding that I'm living in alignment with myself, my true self.